It's a story that everyone thinks they know the truth about. It's a story that only a few people were able to see from the beginning. And I'm joined by one of the people who knows the story better than anyone, Blanca Simpson, former housekeeper to the family of Alec Murdaugh. Blanca, first of all, thank you for making the time to sit down with us.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate
it. It's a pleasure.
I want to start with who this family was before the international firestorm, before the crime of the century in South Carolina, before the trial of the century. Who were the Murdaughs as you knew them before all of that?
They were the big socialites in Hampton County. They were the ones that everybody wanted to be seen with, around, hanging out. They were the family that they just had that personality. You know, you were around them, you had fun. And I guess that's why people like them. You know, they always laughing, joking, and people enjoyed being around them. Yeah. And Maggie loved to entertain people. Alec, you know, the same thing with him. You know, he loved being in the center of attention, and the jokester. And, you know, basically, if you were around the Murdaughs, you were the in crowd. Maybe some people would disagree, but that's what I observed, you know, throughout the years. People just trying to come around. Anything would that would happen around the house or whatever, it was like people would come out there, hey, what's going on? You know, just trying to make themselves, you know, useful or see if they needed anything. So people appreciated. Alec used to do things for them, and people showed appreciation for that. You know, whatever, if he helped them out with, you know, a minor infraction, or people were appreciative of him, and they would do things. You know, they would come and either offer to do whatever little jobs around the house or whatever. He always he took care of the people that helped him, and he was good to people. And
what about their relationships with each other? You obviously saw them closer in a real setting, you know, when their guard was down, when they were being their real selves.
Mm-hmm.
What were those relationships like?
I've said it numerous times. They were like teenagers, especially after the boys went off to college. They would go out to dinner. They would go out to the movies in the middle of the week. They, you know, on the weekends, they would go off together. She was always with him. Wherever he went, you know, he would take her. And before he could even say, hey, you want to go, she had her bag packed. She was going. And they just spent a lot more time together since the boys were off in college, and they were alone. You know, it was just her, the two dogs, and Alec, you know, there at the house. So, yeah.
Do you feel that part of their relationship has been lost in a lot of the portrayals, a lot of the coverage, a lot of the Murdaugh, you know, empire that's been created in the media? Do you think who they really were has been lost?
I do believe it has been lost. They don't. I think part of it has to do with the fact that the public wants to see the villain. I guess the villainous side is what sells, what gets people to watch your shows. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of that going on, and, you know, people want to see that. They don't want to hear the other side. And what I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to say how he was prior to this, horrible incident. But they were normal. They were a normal family. They had their normal issues with their teenage boys. When they were young, the boys would get in trouble. They, like teenagers, they got into things, and just like any of the other kids. And I just want to make sure people know that there was another side to them. And what happened was just a decision he made.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about Maggie and your relationship with Maggie. Was she the member of the family that you were closest with?
In the beginning, when I first went there, it was never my intention to go in there and become, friends or anything like that. I usually keep to myself. I don't really say much, but I just enjoy going in there and organizing and getting everything to make it, not only to make it easier on the family, but it was just the way that I was trained, the way that I was taught. And it also makes it easier for you as well if you organize the family. So I went in there with that purpose, and we just kind of hit it off. There was the initial, when I first met her, I remember Alex said, just go in through the garage and just go right in the door. Well, I wasn't going to just walk in the door. I knocked, and this loud, woman called, come on in, in her little southern twang that I call it. And I walked in. I saw Gloria. Miss Gloria was there. Miss Barbara was there. They were helping her. And then another young lady that also worked there probably a few months when I started going there. Her name was Nora. She was killed in a car accident. But that was after, she had stopped working there. But so she had some ladies. Miss Barbara was just helping her temporarily. But when I met her, she introduced me. She said, hey, y'all, this is Alex's friend, Blanca. Blanca, this is everybody. And everybody just kind of gave me their names. And I didn't know Miss Gloria, but I worked with her sister. Her and I used to work together, and Ginger and I worked at the federal prison. So that's how I knew Ginger. And I knew Miss Gloria's brother because he was the manager at the local Piggly Wiggly. And my daughter used to work for him. So I kind of knew the Gloria's family, but I had never met Gloria until that day. And then Miss Gloria just took me under her wing, and from there, she just told me, this days we do this, on this day we do that. And I just caught on, and after that, whatever they needed to do, I just started doing it. I don't tell me how you need to do it once, and that's it. I'll take care of it and do it, and that's just the way that I was. And I think she had liked that approach, that I wasn't constantly, everybody else was like, Miss Maggie, calling her. What, I never did. I just did it. She didn't like, she would tell me. If she didn't like how something was done, she would tell you, or she would call you and tell you, hey, or if something was missing, she'd call you. It didn't matter. But I never had that problem with her. So she was.
You mentioned Miss Gloria. Obviously, her death is a huge part of this story.
It is. Mm-hmm.
Did you, in the aftermath of her passing, what went through your mind at that time? Obviously, we now know all of these details about the fraud Alec Murdaugh perpetrated on her family members, allegations that perhaps her death wasn't an accident. There's been a lot of speculation about that. But did you see any of that or suspect anything like that could be happening?
No.
Yeah?
No, not at all. Gloria was so loyal to that family. I never imagined. And as a matter of fact, I had spoken to her probably about a week before she passed. And I found out of her passing because I ran into her cousin. I knew when she went to the hospital, but I didn't know that she had passed until I ran into one of her cousins. And I asked her, I said, hey, I haven't had a chance, I've been busy. How's Miss Gloria doing? And she said she passed. So, and like I said, I'm not on social media. I'm not on any of that. I don't, so I didn't know any of what was going on. I don't, like I said before, the one who used to spill the tea and gossip and all that was Maggie. She would tell me what was going on in the town. So I figured I didn't need no social media, So from when I found out about her passing, I ran into her a couple of times. And you could tell that she was down about Gloria. And it had nothing to do with Gloria, not, cleaning her house or doing it. It had nothing. You could tell it was sincere. She really did miss her, When you get used to people doing certain things, certain ways, and you just want to turn around and it's like as for me, when Maggie passed, I would go into the laundry room and just look out the window and start talking, and I think she would do the same, and then she would catch herself talking about, oops, So, yeah, and Paul took it hard as well. He really took Miss Gloria's death pretty hard. Mm.
As things progressed to June 7, 2021, prosecutors who ultimately convicted Alec Murdaugh of the murders of Maggie and Paul described a gathering storm. They described increasingly frantic behavior by Alec. They described a tightening of financial pressures. Did you see any of that gathering storm? Was that something that you witnessed in their interactions or in any of his behavior?
No. First of all, Maggie had no idea about the financial stuff that was going on. She knew there was a lawsuit. She was told, like I said, the amount that she told me was the amount that Alec had told her was the $30 million. I found out later that it wasn't that amount, but that's what she told me that Alec had told her. As far as Alec, he was the last 2 months before Paul and Maggie were killed, he would kind of lounge around at the house, stay in the bed, watch TV, and they would call him and tell him, hey, your client's here. Oh, I'm on my way. He was still in the bed. So, and I didn't really think much of it because of the fact that he was also taking, anytime they called him about his dad, Mr. Randolph was not doing that, he wasn't, health-wise, he wasn't doing well. So he would run out, sometimes to go, be with his dad or take him out or stay at the hospital with him. So, he was tired, and I really didn't put two and two together, that I just figured he was tired. And then Maggie was worried about him too because he was getting hardly any sleep, But I look back on it now and perhaps maybe, all of the stuff that was going on because he wasn't telling her everything that was going on. So I think he was holding a lot of that in and it was building up. And he was just tired and not jittery, but kind of, he wouldn't hold conversations as much. He was constantly on the go, on the phone, that sort of thing. He never really, I didn't see a difference other than, he would stay at the house longer. But I just assumed that it was, his work schedule was not that busy. So I didn't think much of it. I didn't see them arguing. I didn't see them having any kind of, bad interactions. None of that.
Nothing like what's been portrayed.
Well, through the media, you mean?
Dramatizations.
Yeah, there's been a lot of drama behind that, but that wasn't within the home. I'd like to know who their expert witness was because within the home they did not. They they didn't argue. They would fuss every once in a while. Maggie was a perfectionist. She wanted certain, like I said about the white paint, and asking him, which one do you think? And then when she asked me, I think they fooled her, because they probably put the same color white and they told her it was different colors and different shades, but they all looked white to me. So I think Alex said the same thing.
You don't think she was out looking for a divorce attorney?
Oh, most definitely not. No, that was, and I keep telling people that was somebody must have heard her joking around, and she mentioned divorce, but they didn't hear the rest of the conversation where she was going to divorce Alec and marry Tom Brady. There was speculation that Maggie had been looking for an attorney. I've heard some stories, but the time that they said that she was out looking for an attorney, during that time that I heard she had gone, she was with her mom and her sister. They had gone down to the Keys to celebrate her mother's birthday. And so that was during the time that they say she was looking for an attorney. So, like I said, I kind of put the dates together when I started hearing stuff about that. And I was like, she was in Key West, with her sister and her mom. She was not seeking an attorney. She would have said something to me about that. Or she would have asked, what do you think about this? But I don't believe that story. I truly don't. I think somebody overheard her joking, about that. And I guess they took it out of context. But no, Doris, she was not divorcing Alex. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that night at Moselle. You were one of the last people. You were the last person to see this family together.
I saw Paul that Friday when he brought me the laundry basket full of clothes. And I talked to Maggie several times Monday. She called me about the Capri Suns. She said Alec wanted Capri Suns for me to go by the grocery store. I told her I would. And then she called me back and said, hey, I told you the wrong flavors. He wants this one and this one. Then I don't know, pineapple, I can't remember the flavors now, and then probably later on throughout the day, texting and we had some calls, but we texted, and she asked me to cook dinner because she was running late. She sent me a message saying she was at the doctor's office and that something dealing with Alex was tired and on the go. And I think I answered that she was, being on the go doesn't help, much. Y'all need to take some time to yourselves, because they were constantly, back and forth. And then I think I texted her right when I was getting ready to leave. I sent her the text, but I forgot to do something she had asked me to do, take some clothes up to the bunk room. So I put my phone down and I ran upstairs. I went in the laundry room and then I went upstairs in the bunk room, dropped the stuff off, and then I left. But as I was walking out, when I went upstairs, I saw the white F-150 parked in front of the hangar, because you could see it out the window. So I looked out and I saw the white truck, and I just assumed that Paul was home, because Maggie had said Paul was coming, that Alec had also asked Paul to come home that night. And he said, well, he's not too happy about it, but, he's on his way. He's coming out there. And when I was walking out the door, I had seen the truck out there. So when I was walking out the door, I saw the orange tractor on what used to be a landing strip, on the property. And it was going towards the sunflower fields. So I just assumed it was Paul. So I left the front door unlocked, because That's usually what I did, if the boys were home. And I left. And she did not respond to my message, about, Paul being there. So I just assumed it was Paul. But I'm thinking now that she must have been doing her nails and she couldn't really answer. So, but I never got a response. So I just assumed it was Paul. And I found out later that it wasn't.
Yeah, his truck was in the shop.
Yeah, his truck was in the shop. He was driving Dolly. And I have no idea who was driving that tractor out there.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I want to drill in on that a little bit because you've got this amazing book that details not only your experiences with the family, your relationship with Maggie, adopting Bubba, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but you also wrote in the book about how after the murders, you started to remember things, see things, perceive things that set some alarms off, that maybe shifted your view, because in the immediate aftermath, you didn't think there was any universe in which Alec Murdaugh could have done it, correct?
No, I did not. Even to the day that I went to trial, I still was not convinced about it. I knew there were some things that were wrong, that were not in place, but I wanted to believe that I still wanted to believe that. Because of course, you work for a family for so long and you know them in more of an intimate setting, because there's no walls when they're in the house. There's no barriers. They just act like a normal family, and sometimes, they say and do things or act certain ways or do stupid stuff, but they're not thinking, they're in their home. But my big aha moment was when I actually, what convinced me was seeing the towel inside his Suburban, the Officer Green's body cam video, when I saw the towel.
This was the very first Colleton County deputy to arrive on the scene. This is the very first footage from the crime scene right after it happened. Tell us about the towel. What made that significant in your mind?
The towel on the seat told me that Alec had been in that laundry room at Moselle. That was one of the towels that I had laundered earlier and folded and placed up on the shelf in the laundry room. And so that told me he went in the laundry room. Also, one of the things that I noticed was Maggie's pajamas in the doorway to the laundry room, which was Maggie would have never done. Maggie would have never left her pajamas stretched out. It looked staged. It looked like it was set up. It was not. That was not Maggie. And I'll say that till the day Maggie did not do that. In listening to Mr. Waters said, did you have a burst of energy all of a sudden? And it caught in my ear. And then I said, what is he talking about? Because I did not really go through every day of the trial. I did not really want to watch it because I just didn't want to see it. To me, it was hard to watch. But when I heard him say that, I said, wait a minute, what is he talking about? And then I went back, and that's when I listened. I started paying attention, and I kept going back, and I listened to some of where they described that his phone had absolutely no movement, and then all of a sudden he got a burst of energy. And that right there told me the burst of energy was him going in the house, and I guess he must have been in a frenzy, running back and forth. He must have gone in the laundry room, grabbed the towel because it was like a light drizzle out there. So he must have, dried himself off, then ran in the room. I think he was running back and forth from the master bedroom to the laundry room. The pajamas that were laid out on the floor were in the second drawer of Maggie's side. She had a dresser on as a side table. The pajamas were in the second drawer, and the underwear were in the top drawer, top left drawer, in the back. So to me, that indicated that he set up the scene and was kind of like in a frenzy, just going back and forth, trying to get everything together, I guess, so that he could rush back and do whatever he needed to do. But that was the moment the towel kind of told me that he was in the laundry room. But when I heard the movement, all them steps he took all of a sudden, I think he said, "Were you doing jumping jacks?" or something to that effect. That kind of told me then. That kind of cemented my, that actual aha moment that I had when I saw the towel. And it was just a glimpse. It wasn't, if you look at the video, you barely, if you don't really pay attention, you'll miss it. And I kept telling my husband, go back, go back, go back. And when he went back, I said, he did it.
That's when you realized.
Mm-hmm. I didn't need nobody else telling me. I knew at that moment. They can try to explain it any way they want to. But
do you think he had help?
I do.
Really?
I do.
I got to ask the next question. Who do you think helped him?
I will not disclose that.
For reasons of?
My safety.
Yeah?
My safety. I know who they are.
You do?
I do. I know who they are.
You know who helped Alec Murdaugh murder?
I believe I know who they are. Yes. I do.
That leads to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
You have been critical of the investigation into these murders. Tell me, what is your main concern with how these murders were investigated? And would you, if questioned, share your suspicions?
I would, of course I would. I mean, I wasn't trying to be too critical of that. And I think in our small communities, we don't have that type of crime per se. From especially, a family such as theirs. You don't, you've never seen something like that. And I think there was too many people trying to solve the crime right when it happened. And I believe that needs to be addressed. Especially some of the younger rookie officers, that I know they were trying to do their job, and I know they were, being told what they needed to do and all that, and that's fine. But
did they question you? Did SLED question you?
Not for a week and a half later. About a week and a half later passed before they spoke to me.
And obviously they waited to search the house. There were many other.
I had no idea. I was criticized for, it was said that I cleaned the crime scene, that I washed the blood out of the shower, that I, moved stuff around, straightened out. And so it deflected off of law enforcement. And I was the one that basically messed up the crime scene. Well, where was the search warrant on the house? Nobody told me I couldn't go in. Nobody said anything to me. Nobody stopped me. Nothing. I went straight in the house. I stood there. Nobody stopped me. I was never made aware that there was people in that house. I did not know that there was people in the house that night. I didn't know.
You know, one of the ironies of this to me was when you just mentioned that at the outset of the trial, you weren't even convinced at that point that Alec Murdaugh was guilty, but yet your testimony, specifically referencing and confirming that he was trying to plant some things with you about what he was wearing or not wearing, that was when a lot of people watching that trial for the first time, I think myself included, started to think, well, wait a minute, maybe this guy really did it if he's trying to not only concoct this alibi on the one hand, but now bringing other people into this effort. Mm-hmm. So it was your testimony that really...
I can still see him, to this day, I can still see him walking and pacing back and forth in the little house, pacing back and forth, and he hadn't shaved. His shirt was sticking, out of his pants on one side. He was holding that spit cup. He chewed tobacco, and he was like motioning. He said, "I got a bad feeling, B. I got a bad feeling. Sit down. I need to talk to you." At that point, I didn't think much of it, but it kind of concerned me because it's like you never really sit down. Alex was always like, "If you want to talk to me on the go." You kind of had to follow him around. You didn't sit down. When he asked me to sit down, I was like, well, this must be something, concerning to him. But I sat down, and that's when he said, "You remember the shirt I was wearing, that Vinnie Vines?" And I was like, no, not really, but I didn't say anything. I just sat there and I heard him, and I listened, and I kept watching him. He was just going from side to side, pacing back and forth, holding his spit cup. And he was like, it was kind of weird because it's almost like he had like stomach pains or something, because he kept rubbing his stomach, and he's like, something's not right, B, something's not right. But I still see that moment. Even to this day, I still see him doing that in the little house.
Blanca, I think you agree. Alec Murdaugh either did this himself, did it with help, had someone do it. I feel the same. I think he either did it, had help. But there are growing odds, increasing odds, pointing to him getting another trial because of what happened during the first trial with the jury tampering, the alleged rigging of that jury, in fact. Do you think he deserves a new trial based on what you've seen?
I think he should, if they feel that it was not a fair trial, then, we all have that right. As far as how I feel about it, it was rough with the first one. And now a second one, is going to stir everything all up again. And it's not easy when you go through that. It's hard, especially when you lived it. You were around it, and I didn't ask for all of this. I didn't. But I think if they determine that he needs a new trial, then so be it. Do I feel that he deserves a new trial? The way that I feel about that is, if he can answer the question how he could leave his wife and his son there and for a whole hour before calling 911, even though he claims he didn't do it. That's the hurtful part to me, that he left them there and to go get his alibi. And that's what bothers me from the whole thing.
Well, you mentioned his alibi, and there's somebody we haven't talked about yet, but somebody who was instrumental in shredding his alibi, his original alibi. And that's a canine that you have adopted, Bubba.
Bubba.
Tell us about Bubba. Tell us how that came to be.
Buster called me. Once all the roadside shooting happened, we moved out. You know, we left. At that point, we didn't know what was going on. We just didn't want to take any chances. So I remember that day when we left, I cried all the way home. I didn't want to leave him, but I didn't have permission to take him. And I couldn't do that. But I knew he was in good hands because Mr. Dale was really good with the dogs. So I knew he was in good hands. But still, you know, it was hurtful to leave him and Grady behind. You know, it was hard. And then a couple of days later, I guess they were trying to find somebody to take him from the family. I'm assuming. I don't know. But he did say that they asked around and nobody wanted him. Well, they knew he was a little hard to handle. So he said, would you take him? And I said, can I come get him right now? He said, yes, ma'am, you can. So I went straight out there and got him. And I have no regrets when I took him. I've had him with me. I've known him since he was a puppy. And he was stubborn then. So I knew him. I was always fussing at Bubba. It didn't matter what I did. Maggie used to stand at the door and watch me fuss at Bubba, trying to walk him, trying to do whatever. Maggie used to stand at the door and laugh at me. I used to call him Mule. I said, he acts just like a mule because he would sit on me and he wouldn't move. And Maggie would be sitting there laughing and she'd be like, Bubba, come here. And he would get up and go. I'd be like, you know, but he always did me like that. He knew that, and I guess he played around like that, but he could sense it. But it was just funny watching him. I'd be sitting there. It looked like them cartoons where you see the little cartoon character pulling on that was me with him because he would just sit. Because we used to have to, when the fence would go down, the underground fence would go down. So when the fence would go down, we'd have to put him in the kennel because it wasn't working. And Bubba had a tendency he had a very good nose. And he would run off on us. So we would constantly out there looking for him. That was one of Alex's pet peeves because Maggie would take off one direction, I would take off in another. And then he would take off and go to work and he'd be the one calling us, I got him. So Bubba was the canine there at Moselle. He ran that house. He was very active. But
He saw it
playful.
all happen, didn't he?
He did. He did. You can hear him in the kennel video. You can hear some whimpering when not in the kennel video, when Alex calls 911. You can hear him whimpering because that's the same noises that he was making when I first got him. So he knew. He knew what was going on. Mm-hmm. Mm. And one thing that stuck out, and I never really mentioned this, was Alex came by when they emptied out Paul's apartment. They came out to the house to drop off all the clothes and everything they had packed up. And I said, hey, don't you want to say hi to Bubba? And he called him, and Bubba was hesitant at one point, but it didn't really. Looking back now, I can see the hesitation in him, and he went and he petted him, but Bubba was not his usual self around him. And he came back after he, petted him. Bubba came back and just sat right there next to my husband and me. Mm. And I think I told Miss Fran about that, but I haven't really. But I do remember he called him. He's like, hey, and he tried to rough him up, right there and pet him. And Bubba let him do it, and then he just walked away. Mm. And, usually he listened to Alec, but he was a little stubborn. He still is to some point.
You've done a great thing giving him a home.
Mm-hmm. We love him dearly. He's the boss in the house now, so.
He's seen a lot. You've seen a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what, this volume, Within the House of Murdaugh, which you wrote with Fran Weaver, just an amazing volume. I think a lot of folks are going to find these insights just a different take on this. They've heard this story, they've seen this story, but you really do take them inside the story, Blanca, and I appreciate you sharing those thoughts with us, sitting down with us.
And I thank you for listening to me and taking the time to come out. And I would have never been able to do that had it not, Miss Fran was amazing. She's a talent behind that. So I have to, say she did an amazing job. And I appreciate everything that she's done for me.
Blanca Simpson, the book Within the House of Murdaugh. It's available right now. We'll put this up on the screen for everybody. Blanca, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.